All right, the next item on our agenda is old business, which is on page 33. Am I right? No.
48. I have 49.
49? Okay, hold on.
49 policies.
All right. 49, we have on policies, we have parent organization and booster clubs. Policy that was revised 6/7/12. And we also have the press packet. So what do you want? Let's do the parent organization and booster clubs.
Yeah, I'm looking for the board to have further discussion on this tonight. We presented a draft, taking in some things, and we were going to get some more feedback tonight after some board members reviewed it and thought about it.
Any comments from board members?
Yeah, I went on several websites. I went on Hinsdale Central, I went on Oak Park River Forest, and none of the things that we are asking for are on the websites for the parent organizations. And so I feel that our policy is a personal agenda from somebody. Somebody wants to see these things, but is not typical of schools to put them on there. It's not state policy, it's not school code policy, it's not even common. And so I have a problem asking parents who do nothing but good, who have given all this money to the school to do all these extra things, that we're the only school that's going to require our volunteers to do this.
But it's not common. Is it a good idea, though?
Yeah, in their corporations. They're just happen to be done by individuals currently associated with the corporation. If you take the individual people out of it, these are corporate entities, okay? And one of the reasons I did my draft and included a lot of stuff is because, again, I want to set the table for doing as much as we can to get back in sync with the people. And I'm a member of the community, and I'd like to see it. So when I'm off the board, I'd like to come and see what's going on. Comparing ourselves to other schools, other organizations that are not schools, other places, you know, we're in this situation where the referendum was defeated badly. And the more the discussion talks about, don't make people put out all these things, you know, what are you hiding? What is the corporation hiding, and what harm does it do? You know, we sat at that meeting earlier upstairs, and I heard from the organizations that a lot's going to change, a lot's going to change. You're going to see all this stuff out there. But it's been 2 or 3 months now, and we have a listing of the Educational Foundation's board members, but other than that, I don't see anything else. You know, so I thought maybe by the time we got this far down the road that the organizations would do something, but maybe they're going to wait until they're required to do something. I don't know. I'm not their liaison. I don't attend their meetings. I'm not a member of the boosters, and I've never been a member of the boosters for personal reasons. And I think disclosing their expenditures is something we do, and I don't see that there's any harm in having them do that for expenditures, checkbook, whatever it is. I mean, this particular one has it more generic. They'll disclose their financial statements. I'm not sure what that is. Maintain a public website that provides a list of officers, governing board members, organizations, contact information, meeting information, notes, agendas, minutes, financial reports, and annual audit or IRS filing. I think maybe it should be annual audit and IRS filing, whatever exists. And I'm not sure what the financial reports are. Does that include a cash disbursements journal? Then, yeah, I'm happy. Because, you know, I can go and look and see what they're doing with the money. And you have to take the people out of it. These are corporate entities. And their corporate responsibility is to act in a 501c3 capacity They just happen to have a board that is elected by, I don't even know, I didn't review the bylaws that were passed in. But as a community member myself, and there's other community members who haven't been mentioned in emails recently and haven't come up and told us their opinions. I live with one of those community members. I speak to other community members who aren't part of the discussion from that position there or the emails I receive that, you know, they're looking to this board for some overall leadership. And that's what I drafted when I drafted my parent organization policy. The more you put out there, the more you disclose. I agree with the speaker, the less questions you get. You know, we're at a board meeting where there's 2 community members. I think that speaks volumes for the work we're getting done here. If we weren't getting work done properly, there'd be a lot of people lining up at the doors to tell us that. My personal perspective is you can tell how well you're doing by how many people are in the audience. I think we're doing well. I think we've done a lot in the last year. And I'll have a couple things to say in the budget discussion. But I would like to see these parent organizations who are using our name be as transparent as possible. And what does the financial reports mean?
I just took a portion of what you had requested or had proposed and tried to compile it into an abbreviated version, one, so that it didn't seem accusatory or any in nature, but it requested the transparency I think you're looking for. My only caution is if we make it extremely tough on these people, are we going to have trouble finding the people to volunteer to want to do this? And that's why it's just a revised version from my part, but I tried to take in there the suggestions I heard from the board, from what we had in the previous material, try to make them more detailed to say that we want to see financial reports. And I would think that if we feel we're not getting it, we can always come back as a board and redraft this some more. But I think my intentions behind this, Mr. Welch, was to try to move it in the direction you're looking for, transparency, without scaring off people that are volunteering for these organizations or that are in the process of transitioning into leadership roles. So they don't say, hey, listen, I have a full-time job, I don't have time to manage this or that. And
I'd like to follow up on what Mike said. It said that the community wants us to lead, and I think that's what we should do. And I think some people make suggestions that are good, and some maybe aren't as good compared to what we see out there. And I do, if it's convenient, we say, look at what other people do. If it's inconvenient, we say, who cares what other people does? I sent information to Kevin so it could be circulated. We had a community member several times in a row talk about boards he was on. One was the City Club, which I shared the information. My company's been on it for years. It's got every blue chip company in Chicago on it. They had $750,000 of income. They have nothing on their. They don't have any of the information except who their officers are. My problem is, if people, you said they're 501c3 and they're state non-for-profits. Well, guess what? There's already government controls for both. The IRS manages 501c3s. The U.S. Attorney General manages not-for-profits. If they're not doing the right thing, that's supposed to manage them. And this toned down somewhat, what Kevin did from what you originally had, still is extremely more complicated and asking for more. And if you can, again, if somebody found some websites that require more than what I haven't seen it. And if the members, it's the members to manage it. I mean, we're almost saying, we want to make it to the public so people who aren't members can get information about it. I mean, if you're a member, you can get the information. Yeah, they use their name. We should have some feedback, but we should not manage, in my mind, a private corporation who does good and put heavy burdens on them.
So if I become a member, I can ask for everything I'm asking and post it on my own website?
I don't know if you could post it on your own website.
Why not?
Why not?
Well,
And what,
members of nonprofit organizations do have a right under state law to get information, but I don't know that it gives them the right to make it public. I don't know that answer.
well, I think that's the opposite. Non-for-profit organizations, their books should be an open book. That's why the tax return says, where are the books and records available for public inspection? And for years and years, the foundation said erroneously that they said nothing is available publicly, and they said that was wrong. So why does 5 or 6 community members all ask for all this information and have them do it 5 or 6 times? Or let's encourage them to put it out there so that it's only a click away and you can look at it. Now, you mentioned in other meetings that this board doesn't do posting of things that we should be doing. And I encourage this board to make a list of those things, and let's try to get more of that. Earlier in the meeting, I couldn't get to the website where the public could see the board tab. You know, we have the IT guy here, and he changed the password. But I don't really care what the downtown club does. I don't really care who's on their board. I care what happens in this building, because this building's going to come and ask me for money. And if I don't have a good feeling about what's happening in this building, whether it be at the board level or anywhere else, I'm inclined as an individual not to give this school more money. And that's what I've been working on for the 2.5 years I've been on the board. Trying to get to the point where we're telling the public, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Here's the documents. Put out as much as we can out there. Encourage all the people associated with this school using our name to do the same. That's where I'm coming from. I don't really care what the Hinsdales, Oak Parks, clubs who aren't schools. I don't really care about all that. I care about our community and how are we going to regain the public's trust.
But can we regain the public's trust by saying, listen, we checked all over the place. Nobody has these kind of requirements on these volunteer organizations to try to raise money to do good for the school. And we don't think we should make it more difficult for these volunteer organizations to continue to do good for it. Aside from the fact a few people have some issues with some historical things that went on. I mean, to me, that's part of the communication to the community. It's just like the report. You're doing the other thing. Okay, we're going to put more information, but understand what was there, we found is what was typical of what schools did. We're doing more. But in this case, it's more of our own burden. In this community relations, it's more putting burdens on other people who they're volunteering, they have other things to do, and it's like, how much more time do we want to do good for the school?
So all these other places you looked up, how many of those other places had problems like we've had in the past? And you can't ignore the past.
How do we know?
You can't ignore the past.
But I think when we say problems of the past, we're asking patrons. Now, I have been a member of Patrons Council for many years and worked on these committees, and I've been a member of Roosters and a member of the Music Club, and they are 501(c)(3)s, so they have rules, and then there's an agenda, and we get the budget every month, and that agenda is posted on the website, so you have that information. But, you know, we're moms and there's dads in these clubs. Who's going to file the IRS 99 filings? All of us are volunteering in our free time, raising money, giving it to school, and every month a budget is given to the members who come and post on the website. Isn't that transparent enough?
They're required by law to put the 990.
And when we say that problems, are we accusing patrons who's done nothing but give scholarships and give money and support programs that they weren't honest with their money? Are we accusing our volunteers of doing that?
Your point about the IRS 990 filing, if they meet certain thresholds, they're required by law to file that. So you got to go back to the corporate entity. The corporate entity is required by law to do that. So whether it's a mom, a parent, a dad, the corporate entity's responsibility is to do that. I've never said anything about patrons in this discussion, except in the written format where if there was no filings for them. Boosters for a long time, I believe, were saying that they were a tax deductible donation, but they really weren't. I think that's a mistake. The Education Foundation came out and said their returns for all these years that I gave to everyone was a mistake.
Well, I see two different things. There's the legal aspect of having to go about the task of filing the 990, but then there's a second task of publicizing the proper disposal of the 990 and the housekeeping involved in publication of all of the tasks that we're asking our benefactor groups to do. But I had a different question about this. Have we sat down and talked to the officers of these three groups and asked them what would be a tolerable level? I mean,
I don't think
we're not ready to vote on
I don't
this.
think I've talked as a board to those people since they were in the audience several
Yeah, I'm
months
just
ago.
wondering if maybe if we had a roundtable and see what an acceptable level of effort is, because I hear, you know, I use the term onerous, and I've heard onerous floated around forever since last month's meeting. I agree, you don't want to push the limit where people just walk away and say, I don't want to be involved in this. I don't even know what a 990 is, you know, but you got to do it. But is there a point at which you push people so far that they just back out of it, you know, and stop being, you know, having the willingness to participate? I would like to talk to the officers of these groups.
Any other discussions?
I think that you make a good point, Dan. This could always be modified, you know, in the future if we feel that's the case.
Well, what would be a tolerable level?
You know,
And
Mike,
do what
this is the
Mike
first
says.
time you've really talked about the fact that we've got a serious problem in the school. That's the same reason I ran for the board. We've totally lost public trust. Like it or not, if it's valid or not, the vote was 3.5 to 1. That's a horrible vote, considering the success of our school. That means we have a fundamental problem. And then maybe this might be going a little too far, but I think we need to go a little too far, or err on the side of going too far if we're going to regain that trust. Now, in terms of this being a burden, it actually might even be helpful to these organizations to recruit new people, because people will be more enthusiastic about it, contributing, that they know there's full transparency. So we can't assume this is going to be a bad thing. It could be a good thing. I'm going to vote for this, and I think, you know, let's revisit it next year and see what happens.
And as far as, if you've ever served on one of these boards and are handed the checkbook and the records and everything is in disarray or non-existent, then posting this could be a good thing, where each year there's things out there that are posted so that they're not lost in the abyss when they hand you the checkbook, which has been my experience with some of my volunteer positions. And I think, depending on the definition of this financial reports, you know, I think maybe we should go too far. Next year, if the board turns over and someone wants to reverse everything we've done, you know, that's the board's discretion. But a lot of what I'm trying to accomplish here is to get out all the bad vibes that are out there, including the vibes I have. And I think the more these organizations do, are encouraged to do, required to do, or actually get done and get it out there, is going to help bring that 3.5 to 1 closer in line.
Gary, you got anything to say?
Having been a volunteer treasurer for a PTO organization, probably forcing treasurers to keep up current and putting a little onus on them is probably better based on handoffs I've gotten or degree of paperwork on getting cash receipts and things, what have you, on it. I'd like to, taking what Mr. Moon has said, I'd like to have a conversation with the organizations to get their perception on really what they believe is onerous. I think once this was brought up, you saw a couple of them come forward and said they caught up on their paperwork. And I think I haven't heard them being negative about this. And they know we've been discussing this now for several months. I haven't seen them come to the board meeting to say one way or the other on what they believe. So I'd like to get a conversation go with them to see if they believe it's really that onerous.
And I agree with what Gary said too, because I've served on a couple of boards where we have really been hard on the financials, and people have asked us about, where's your reports, where's your expenditures for an event or anything like that, and by having that, I think you gain credibility with the mother organization or the organization that you're with, because they realize that, you know what I mean, you got it together. So, any other comments that we haven't heard yet?
Yeah, I'd like to, if in the agenda packet, every month, these organizations put their budget, how much is in the budget and what was spent each month, wouldn't that be sufficient? Why would we require a volunteer group to have to list each check? Because when you work in the volunteer groups, the receipts come in at odd times and you're picking them up, but every month the cost or line item, and it's posted. And that is published. And my concern is, if we lose these groups, they contribute over $100,000 a year to this school. The likelihood of getting groups back that dissolve, go away, is very low. Are we willing to take that risk?
We could get $200,000 next year. I mean, you've got no basis for that statement.
Yeah, how do you get 100,000?
Boosters donates about $60,000 a year, and when we were in patrons, we donated. Actually, patrons has gone down, John, because the economy. You're not even taking that referendum wasn't only because the school has big problems. The referendum also was in part because of an economy that was stressful and people lost jobs.
Right.
You can't blame everything on, something insidious is happening in the school. There's also an economy in the world around us.
Who said? I said it's 3.5 to 1. I mean, considering the great history of this school, there's no way it should have been that. It should have been maybe 55-45. There is a serious problem beyond the economy with this school, and we need to fix it.
And we're not going to win the economic votes because we can't change the economy.
That's right.
So let's do things that we can to improve the perception. And
Well, in order to ever get closure on this, it seems like we have one or two choices. Because like Kevin tried to cut it down. I said last time, I still think it's a little heavy, but I'm willing to approve it to move on because we can get it done. So we either need to vote on this and have people live with it, or we need to say this is what we're planning to vote on and have our 3 representatives go talk to each, Pam and Kevin and Art, go talk to the clubs and say, if we vote on this, would you be okay with it? But we can't ask and do that, and then next time put 10 more things on the list that Kevin took off, because we'll never get closure on this.
Okay, so looking at the current policy that's in front of us, Michael, your question is financial reports?
what's the definition of, what am I voting on?
For financial reports.
I think their bills list. One of the officers that I did talk to, they use Quicken. So at their monthly meetings, they would provide a Quicken report and then publish it on their website of.
It'd be Kevin's discretion, though,
Right.
like every other policy that says that the superintendent will manage it.
So maybe you've already had conversations regarding this policy?
I did talk with one officer. We talked about the transparency and the transition. That officer told me that they have intentions to moving it forward. They were going to put more detail. They use Quicken to manage their finances, so when they post their monthly agenda and their minutes, they would post their Quicken report that would show what they cut checks for and what was approved at the meeting. To me, I think that's a step already in the right direction. If we see that they're not doing that, the question would then be, we'd come back to the board and say, well, how do we pull?
So they were open to this?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I don't know necessarily.
Well,
I'd
that answers that.
I'd be saying, let's go take the vote forward on it.
But if they can't do this, patron says I can't get that up there, are we going to say you can't exist?
And that was the one thing that the attorney wrote in his letter, the more that you put out there, the more they're probably going to be turning back to the school for assistance or help in establishing these things and posting these things. So we have to be able to understand that, you know, we'll be having to give some resources and time to these groups to help them upload those things.
Okay.
And try to get.
And I think, Laura, you keep talking about these people who live out of shoeboxes. I'm not sure they do.
We heard one person say, we don't want the board to have, we heard a representative for patrons say they thought this was onerous, that it was too much. You have one person say they want all this, and one person says they don't, but we side with your opinion. You want it, and so you're going to hear the one person who wants it.
No, I'm saying you talk like it's going to be too difficult to make a PDF copy of these items, like they live out of a shoebox, where what he just mentioned, someone who uses Quicken, it is pretty easy to print it to PDF, and there it is, it's emailable or postable or whatever. If somebody living out of a shoebox has a handwritten checkbook, you know, we can, is that what you're talking about? It's being too difficult for them to do? I'd like to hear from them as to like what they're doing and how difficult it is, so I
can almost guarantee you, none of them are going to meet the requirements, what we say has got to be in their bylaws. Because what do you think the chances are, we haven't told them yet, that they have to have an agreement in their bylaw, an agreement to adhere to all board policies and administrative procedures?
That was in the previous one.
That was in the previous one.
Okay. But
So
we didn't-
right, so then they should work at getting that.
Okay.
If we pass the other policy, my policy or this policy, I think it was in all three of them.
Laura, I don't think we're here to shut these organizations down and to make them be painful for them. I think what we're trying to do is get transparency going forward. We'll work with it. It's not like turn the switch and say this policy's in place and we're shutting you down because you haven't made any attempt.
But you have all this information now, Gary. You could see their financials if you look at their agendas.
Where?
The agendas are posted. We just asked for their agenda packet to be posted on the web.
Well, it's not for us, it's for the community. It's not just for us. It's not for
But if
us.
we just ask them to post their agenda, the financials are there.
Okay, let's
Let's have a vote.
let's
We
move
are the
ahead.
only organization asking this of our volunteers.
Okay, so you said that before, so what I'm saying right now is, let's put this on the agenda so any other concerns? So Michael, you have a concern that you want to see the financial reports broken out in more detail, or do you want to?
If I'm going to vote for that sentence, financial reports, I'd like to know what the financial reports are. I think an annual audit is a financial report. If I'm not mistaken, that could be a financial report. We don't necessarily need that word, annual report.
Okay.
And they should put their federal and state filings, whatever those are.
So we're back where we are. We can't go to them and say, here's what we're thinking of, but some people want to add things to it. Agree with this, and then next time we add things, and then we have to go to them again.
So looking at number 7, because that seems to be, you would rather have it say monthly financial reports and an annual audit or IRS filing, or you get rid of the financial reports and just say an annual audit and an IRS filing? I mean, is that easier to them to say, instead of having to post your monthly financials every year, you have to have a copy of your filing?
I'm not married to monthly, quarterly, you know. I'm interested in seeing how they're spending whatever money is being donated to them as a donator.
So if we change that to quarterly financial reports and took out.
And then what are the quarterly financial reports? Are they balance sheets? Are they income statements? Are they cash disbursements journals? Are they cash receipts journals? I mean, you know, that goes back to the question. If your understanding, Kevin, is that they're going to list their bills and who they pay, then yes, if that's the definition of financial reports.
I'll tell you now, Excel is what patrons used for years. They had an Excel spreadsheet, but they didn't list every name, check number.
They
Would
probably
that be
don't
enough?
have a duty under either set of guidelines to do a monthly or quarterly report.
Okay, so I want to get this resolved so
Just
that
one-
we're ready to vote on it next month.
I think that one thing that's going to assuage the people that Laura's talking about that have some concern about compliance is execution of all of these 8 requirements of our policy. The liaison is somebody that the superintendent will choose to be the go-to person. How much can we count on the liaison helping, even hand-holding, somebody that's not as sophisticated about financial matters as others are?
Well, he already picked them. It's him for Reef,
It's
Pam's
Tim.
on the boosters, and,
Oh.
excuse me, the patrons,
And Art's on the
the...
booster.
Okay.
So Pam, could you give them like advice on how they should do their financial reports?
I need help.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, that's my question.
I can help
In
them.
order to make them
Yeah.
feel comfortable
Yeah.
complying, is there a liaison that can help them along?
Can I make a suggestion to the board? If we're sticking on 1 or 2 words, I think this should appease to the majority of the board that we're looking for more transparency. And at the same time, it's broad enough to allow these people to give some flexibility to let them show their responsibilities as a corporation, how they want to post their financials. We're going to have to allow them 3 or 4 months to get some of this stuff uploaded and stuff. I mean, we just transitioned to board books, and you noticed tonight that we tried to get as many of our old meetings up there, but they were locked out, or Laura couldn't get to this, or we didn't remind. Well, there's going to be transition time, and we have 2 full-time IT people, so there's going to be a growth period for them. 6 months, 8 months, if we come back to the board and it's time for them to give their annual reports and they don't have this stuff, we obviously need to make this policy tighter, or give them a letter of notification that if they don't get this, they're going to lose the ability to call. I mean, there's some things we could put in place that this is broad enough that it's requiring, I think, the transparency the board's looking for, and yet we give them some responsibility to allow them to manage it. I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Any comments on that?
Sounds like a plan.
Yep.
What?
Sounds like a good idea.
Michael?
So are you recommending, though, to vote on this now, or bring this draft to your liaisons, bring this draft to their group and see
I
if
would
they have a
think
problem?
maybe, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
I would think maybe, as Gary suggests, you reach out to them again and see what they think is their...
That this is the
what-
direction we're looking at,
you know,
this policy here?
Because what if they don't have any big hurdles that they're going to complain about? And if they do have big hurdles, then
Problem
Let's
goes
address
away.
them. Sorry, so what we're going to do is, and do you think, because we have the summer months, so let's give you till a September board meeting, would that be all right? That you'd have your feedback to us before that, and then we would then vote on this policy.
Okay.
I would think we should, Pam, do you have any kind of patron scheduled for August?
I don't.
So September.
I don't know if I'll find out.
We can hold till September for a vote.
They
Yeah,
might
that's what
not
I'm
be till
saying. So,
September.
and if you get feedback before our August meeting, then we can talk about it at the August meeting.
I think just to make sure we're all on the same page, the goal is to send them the version that you're looking at now that says revised 6, 7, 12, tell them this is the general direction the majority of the board is looking at.
And the
Do you
liaisons.
see major issues with this?
And I think
If
we'll-
so, what are they, so that I can report them back, each of us can report back to me, and I'll create a general consensus for the board.
And I think the liaisons, when you talk to them about like general statements, like financial reports, directionally, it's what we're looking for, okay? All right, any other questions?